Good morning and welcome to Victorious Life Church. Gresia is from the country of Cuba. Thank you, Brother Phil. And she gave us a little bit of her testimony this morning, but you have been in the United States for how many years now?
16 years.
And so your father was a pastor in Cuba?
Yes, my father was a youth pastor in the local church in our town, and he was persecuted because he would go and preach in the mountains. And so he was sentenced from 8 to 20 years in prison. What they didn't know at the time was that he would be more dangerous inside of prison than outside.
My Lord.
Because when he went to prison, he was sentenced with 3 of his friends, and all of them loved Jesus, and they started preaching inside the prison, and they didn't like that. So they separated all 4, and they kept preaching, so the word of God spread even faster than with all 4 of them in one cell.
Wow. Wow. And so as a child, you grew up in Cuba, and share with our audience here and on television of the kind of conditions you lived in while you're growing up in Cuba.
In Cuba, everyone is the same class. Everyone is poor, and the food is rationed. The people are oppressed. You only get paid $12 a month, and the food that the government gives you only lasts you a week and a half, and it's supposed to last you a month. So there is a black market for food, and it's illegal to carry more than 3 pounds of any kind of food. So people really struggle to sustain themselves and their families.
And so did you all have running water and lights and all of that?
The bigger cities would have this more often, but most of Cuba always ends up with having 2-3 days in the middle of the week without electricity or running water.
You know, we are so spoiled here in the United States of America. If a storm comes by and we out for a couple of hours, we just going crazy. And so your father spent how long in jail for preaching the gospel?
My dad was a total of 4 years in prison in Cuba until 1998, when the Pope went to Cuba and asked for the freedom of political prisoners who had not committed any crimes, and they were released and basically exiled from the country.
And so for how many years was there no presence of God allowed in Cuba?
Fidel Castro took over in 1959, and he practically closed all the churches and banned Christmas, and no one was allowed to worship until the early 90s, that a few house churches started popping up, but even they were persecuted.
So since President Obama has lifted the sanctions, I think a lot of Americans think that now Cuba is like everywhere else. What condition is Cuba in now?
Since the government owns everything and no one is allowed to own businesses, it's not going to benefit the individual Cuban people. So all the economic gain goes to the government because they own all the businesses. What we're hoping for is that eventually, with some influence from outside, we will start to shift the culture into a more democracy mentality.
So you were sharing with us earlier this morning that every generation, it seems that they are born with this slave mentality because they're really in slavery. Mm-hmm. And so how do we as Christians in America help to help the Cubans that are here make a difference in your homeland?
The government of Cuba obviously know that religion is a danger to their dictatorship because it breaks people free from slavery, and they are enslaved right now. They are being oppressed. So Christian books, materials, Bibles, any Christian literature helps to kind of open people's eyes a little bit over there.
Wow. Well, I appreciate you coming to share with us. And so Victorious Life is going to be responsible for getting some Bibles into Cuba.
Thank you.
And your father is a pastor here in Kansas City now, so our churches are going to hook up, and we're going to do as much as we can do to make a difference in the lives of those folks who are in bondage.